The Neomorph makes its debut in Ridley Scott's Alien Covenant and totally became the star of the show. Some fans rightly appreciated it more than the titular monster simply because it felt like a breath of fresh air. The original Alien was a truly unique and terrifying monster just because of the new kind of fear it radiated. Men and women becoming pregnant due to oral insemination. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon came to the rescue by introducing director Ridley Scott to the eerie and surreal artwork of H.R. Giger. Scott was immediately captivated by Giger's unsettling visuals, which ultimately gave birth to the infamous creature inspired by Giger's work, particularly the renowned painting known as Neomoprh. In Alien Covenant, a film that serves as a prequel, the franchise's titular and iconic extraterrestrial menace was not the sole deadly predator. The introduction of the lethal Neomorph provided fans with an intriguing glimpse into a possible precursor to the creature that terrorized Ellen Ripley's crew in the original Alien. Known for its white and slender physique, the Neomorph differs significantly from the classic space nightmare that the android Ash famously hailed as the perfect organism. While the question of which of these murderous aliens is stronger remains unanswered as they've yet to face off on screen, it has intrigued fans since forever. In this video, we will explore everything there is to explore about Neomorphs, from their origin in the franchise, their life cycle, and what makes them as deadly as the Xenomorphs. So, without further ado, let's get this ride started. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Neomorph Origins. Tracing their origins in the Alien franchise. David's assault on the engineer settlement using the black goo was actually the beginning of the long process of the birth of the first ever Neomorph. It was essentially a hybridized parasitic organism resulting from the mutagen's contamination of the planet's ecosystem. Although the mutagen either killed or mutated all non-botanical life forms, it did affect the flora as well. In David's laboratory, located in the lower levels of the Engineer Temple, specimens representing each stage of the Neomorph's life cycle were housed, along with several immature and embryonic Neomorph specimens that were the outcomes of his biogenetic experiments aimed at creating the ultimate organism. In the movie Alien Covenant, two members of the Covenant security detail, Ledward and Hallett, fall victim to the spores that had been transformed by the black goo. Ledward was infected through his ear, while Hallett was exposed through his nasal passages. Ledward's job on Planet 4 was to protect the lead biologist, Corinne Oram, as she conducted research on the planet's ecosystem and collected samples. However, Ledward decided to take a smoke break and left Corinne's side. Inattentive to his surroundings, he unknowingly trampled on several egg sacs in the vicinity, which released a cloud of airborne spores that entered his ear and infiltrated his body. He felt an itch but ignored it. Soon, Ledward's health deteriorated, so Corinne took him back to Lander 1 for medical attention. Maggie Ferris, the pilot, discovered something unfamiliar under Ledward's skin in the ship's sickbay. Frantically, Ferris herself evacuated and left Corinne behind with a sick Ledward. As Ledward's convulsions grew more severe, Corinne tried to comfort him. However, her efforts were in vain. This was the moment that a barbed creature erupted from Ledward's back. Well, of course, this was the first Neomorph bloodburster that appeared in the movie. It attacked and severely injured Corinne before turning its attention to Ferris. She attempted to fend off the creature but inadvertently ignited the ship's munitions locker during her struggle. I mean, the woman was shooting blind and something bad was bound to happen. The resulting explosion obliterated Lander 1, which killed Ferris and left the remaining survivors stranded on Planet 4. Ledward's body was consumed in the blast, while the Neomorph that had emerged from him escaped into the wilderness. Meanwhile, the crew came across a crashed alien ship, and inside, Hallett stumbled upon a peculiar puffball-like plant. Hoping to claim credit for the discovery, Hallett attempted to probe the fungus, but the disturbance released the spores and he inadvertently inhaled them. These microscopic organisms made their way into his nostrils, causing momentary discomfort, but this went largely unnoticed by the rest of the team. In due course, Hallett fell ill, and an urgent call from Lander 1, which was made by Ferris, compelled the team to retreat from the wreckage. However, before they could reach the lander, Hallett succumbed to convulsions, collapsing to the ground as the creature inside him violently forced its way through his throat, ultimately ending his life. Now, this was the second Neomorph. Shortly thereafter, two Neomorphs returned and launched an attack on the crew. When one of them lunged at Daniels, Walter intervened, but paid a high price when the creature bit off his synthetic hand. It then struck Walter with its tail, tossing him aside before targeting the rest of the crew. Despite security officers' attempts to shoot it, the creature grew even more enraged, lashing out and fatally striking and killing Angkor with its tail. It then turned its fury towards Daniels, but was killed by Rosie. Moments later, the second Neomorph appeared and attacked Rosie. This Neomorph nearly killed her, but a timely intervention by David, who fired a flare gun into the air, frightened it away and spared Rosie's life. Later, the crew went with David to the Engineer Temple for safety. While the others tried to figure a way out of Planet 4, Rosie went to take a bath. It was now that the second Neomorph infiltrated David's temple, where it gruesomely ended Rosie's life by tearing off her head with its jaws. David discovered the Neomorph feeding on her remains and tried to communicate with and tame it. However, Chris Oram, the captain, arrived shortly thereafter, and against David's wishes, Oram shot the creature dead in a fit of rage. Of course, that didn't end well for Oram either, as David deceived him into becoming a host for a Xenomorph chestburster. From Spore to Savage, the complete life cycle of a Neomorph. The life cycle of a Neomorph is fairly different from that of a typical Xenomorph, and it's quite natural because David's perfect organism, according to the movie, is a more evolved form of the Neomorph. Having said that, the Neomorph's life cycle is equally complex and is made up of various stages. Let's explore these, shall we? Stage 1. Neomorphic egg sacs. The initial phase of the Neomorph's life cycle is basically the egg sac, which resembles a fungal growth. These sacs are found in clusters throughout Planet 4 due to contamination by the mutagenic chemical A03959X.91-15 pathogen. Stage 2. Motes. When the egg sacs are disturbed or damaged by a potential host, they release clusters of spore-like motes. I'm not entirely sure if they release the spores because of just any external stimuli, for instance rain or wind. It seems as though the stimuli has to be a living animal. These motes come together to form an airborne mass. Possessing a basic hive intelligence, these motes seek out the nearest viable host organism, entering through openings such as auditory canals or nostrils. Individually, the motes are minuscule, no larger than a grain of sand, but when clustered together they can become faintly visible. Under a microscope, they appear similar to tiny parasitic insects. Stage 3. Bloodburster. The Bloodburster is basically the infant stage of the Neomorph and is, of course, comparable to a chestburster. Likewise, the Bloodburster is the third phase of a Neomorph's life cycle and is notorious for its gruesome method of gestation. Once the Bloodburster is fully formed within a host, it violently breaks through the host to gain its freedom. Despite being an infant Neomorph, the Bloodburster emerges almost fully formed, similar to the Deacon from Prometheus, which is contrary to a Xenomorph chestburster, which takes its final form after bursting out. Furthermore, the exact point of emergence varies based on how the host was infected, possibly what the host was wearing after the gestation was complete. If the host wears clothing, the Bloodburster prefers to come out from uncovered areas such as the mouth. The Bloodburster is essentially a small quadruped with the ability to defend itself, which also distinguishes it from the vulnerable chestburster, which immediately goes into hiding after its birth. As far as its appearance and color are concerned, the Bloodburster resembles an infant runner Xenomorph, with pale white-gray skin with somewhat translucent quality, much like a hammerpede. Much like the Xenomorph, the Bloodburster adopts characteristics from the host organism, with specific traits varying depending on the mode of emergence. For instance, when it bursts from Leadward's spine, it sports dorsal fins on its back. However, when emerging from Hallett's mouth, it lacks these features but exhibits more translucent skin with a subtle sheen. But I suppose the most interesting thing about the Bloodbursters is their aggression right from birth. Stage 4. Neomorph. Following the Bloodburster stage, a Neomorph rapidly matures into a juvenile form known as a neophyte, and it happens very quickly within a few hours. These voracious carnivores typically stand between 120 to 180 centimeters in height and possess the same level of aggression and tenacity as their adult counterparts. In due course, the neophyte transitions to full maturity, reaching a rough height of 210 centimeters or more. During the process, the bulbous head of the Bloodburster transforms into an elongated, pointed shape, and the creature adopts a bipedal stance. In contrast with Xenomorphs, Neomorphs have an exceptionally short lifespan, often succumbing within 24 hours of their birth. The fungus that interacts with a deceased Neomorph's corpse undergoes a transformation, giving rise to new egg sacs and initiating the cycle anew. Neomorphs versus Xenomorphs. What exactly makes Neomorphs so dangerous? Well, to begin with, Neomorphs have seriously sinister mouths that kind of resemble earthly creatures like the goblin shark. But these mouths are not just for intimidation of their prey. In contrast to Xenomorphs' humanoid teeth, Neomorphs can extend their gums to widen their bite, and their mouths are considerably larger than Xenomorphs. Yes, I agree that the Neomorphs lack a second mouth and all that, but if you're up against a Neomorph, there's fairly little that will save you. This allows a Neomorph to inflict severe damage and pain with a single bite, while a Xenomorph would require multiple bites to achieve similar results. Neomorphs become increasingly vicious due to their exceptional speed. While Xenomorphs are no slouch in this department, Neomorphs outshine them in agility. Earlier, we saw in Alien Covenant how a newborn Neomorph swiftly eliminated several Covenant crew members in seconds within tall grass. This speed compensates for their smaller size, enabling them to inflict numerous casualties rapidly. In fact, it also compensates for their hide, which is organic and not biomechanical like that of Xenomorphs. Neomorphs, unlike Xenomorphs, undergo a quicker evolutionary process, and I'm not just talking about their growth after coming out of the host. I'm talking about all the stages of their development. Once contaminated airborne bacteria with the black goo infects a host, a bloodburster violently bursts out of their back, capable of killing individuals many times its size. This tiny creature matures into a deadly Neomorph faster than a Xenomorph typically becomes a threat. In fact, even the time taken for the spores to develop into a bloodburster is also considerably low when compared to a Xenomorph chestburster. But what makes the Neomorphs a true force of nature's ugly wrath is their heightened aggression. Neomorphs are inherently more aggressive. From the moment of birth, their instinct is to eliminate any living beings in their vicinity. They are the very embodiment of ruthless efficiency, and they come without pretense or subtlety, which reflects their primal nature as killing machines. But then again, they aren't really a force of nature, are they? According to Covenant, the black goo was a synthetic liquid that the engineers had engineered. This liquid went on to transform Planet 4 and give rise to the egg sacs that contained the spores. The Neomorphs come into existence when bacteria infected by the accelerant enters a host life form. This virus is a consequence of David's actions, particularly when he unleashed it on the engineer's planet. Next, the Neomorphs differ in their creation process, as the movie tells us that David had been on to something throughout his long stay on Planet 4. Therefore, unlike Xenomorphs, which rely on facehuggers to implant hosts with eggs, Neomorphs are a byproduct of David's mission to create his own perfect organism. This means that, intentionally or not, the amoral android can potentially enhance their lethal capabilities, making them even deadlier. Marvelous verdict! When Ridley Scott returned to the Alien franchise with Prometheus in 2012, he aimed to avoid the rehashing of the original creature. Scott believed that years of sequels and overexposure had dulled the menace of the Xenomorph, leading Prometheus to become more of a spin-off than a traditional sequel, in this case, a prequel to the previous movies. However, fan demands for the Xenomorph's return prompted the studio to insist on its inclusion in Alien Covenant. Consequently, Covenant evolved into a blend of Prometheus and the traditional Alien elements. That is how, in Alien Covenant, a new entity called the Neomorph made its debut. The concept of an albino creature was initially considered in James Cameron's original draft for his 1986 movie Aliens, where white drones played a role in cocooning victims in the hive, though this idea was ultimately abandoned. While the Neomorph shares some similarities with the Xenomorph, it also possesses distinct characteristics that make it as deadly as Xenomorphs, if not more so. That's all for today, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.